Millionaire CEO plays with a crying boy child at a wedding, stunned when the boy's mother showed up. This is a story of how a 30-second encounter between two people who had every reason to walk away from each other became the love story that broke every rule about who's supposed to be together. And it all started with a child's tears. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comment where you are watching from. Hit subscribe if you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story. Because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you, and I do not want you to miss it for anything. Now let's get into the story. The tears of a 4-year-old shouldn't matter to a man worth $47 million, but somehow they did. Julian Thorne adjusted his Italian silk tie for the third time, watching the Charleston wedding reception unfold before him like a perfectly choreographed business merger. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the antebellum mansion's ballroom, where his college roommate's third wedding was proceeding with the precision money could buy. Julian had flown in from New York on his private jet for this, not out of sentiment, but obligation. His presence here would photograph well for the society pages, and maintaining his image as the youngest self-made tech mogul in Forbes' top 50 required these carefully calculated appearances. He nursed his 20-year Macallan, observing the celebration with the detached efficiency that had built his empire. The bride, a pharmaceutical heiress, glided across marble floors in her $15,000 gown. The groom, his old roommate Michael, had traded his third wife for a fourth with the casual ease of upgrading a car lease. Julian understood the transaction. Love was a luxury item, marriage a portfolio merger. His phone buzzed with urgent emails from Tokyo. A merger hung in the balance, millions riding on his signature. Yet something pulled his attention away from the screen, a sound that cut through champagne laughter and string quartet melodies. Crying. Not the polite sniffles of emotional wedding guests, but the raw, heartbroken sobs of a child. Julian's chest tightened unexpectedly. He'd built his fortune precisely because he didn't let emotions cloud judgment, yet something about that sound reached past his carefully constructed walls. 3 miles away, Amelia Washington tied her restaurant apron with practiced precision, her dark fingers moving efficiently despite her exhaustion. The lunch rush at Magnolia's kitchen had been brutal. 2 servers called in sick, leaving her to manage both the kitchen and front of house at the soul food restaurant she'd been working at for 3 years. The tips barely covered daycare and rent for their 1-bedroom apartment, but she made it work. She always made it work. Her phone lit up with a text from Mrs. Patterson, the elderly white woman who watched 4-year-old Noah during her shifts. Wedding reception job came up last minute. I had to bring Noah with me to the venue. He's being good, don't worry. Amelia's stomach dropped. She knew Mrs. Patterson meant well, but Noah didn't belong at some fancy Charleston wedding. Her beautiful, sensitive boy with his café-au-lait skin and curious hazel eyes. He'd stand out like a single brown leaf on a pristine white tablecloth. Rich white folks had a way of making her son feel small without saying a word. She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of flour. The industrial kitchen's heat made her uniform cling uncomfortably, but she couldn't afford to leave early. Every hour counted when you were raising a child alone on minimum wage plus tips. Her nursing degree hung on their apartment wall like a beautiful lie. She'd been 2 semesters from graduation when her ex-boyfriend Justin left her pregnant and broke. "Amelia, order up," called Carlos from the grill. She grabbed the plates, forcing a smile for the customers. 3 more hours until her shift ended. 3 more hours until she could get to Noah and bring him home to their small but safe world, where people like Julian Thorne didn't exist to remind her of everything she'd never have. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Mrs. Patterson. Noah in his little blue dress shirt, tears streaming down his face as he sat alone on ornate garden steps. The caption read, "He's overwhelmed by all the fancy people. I'm working inside and can't comfort him right now." Amelia's heart shattered into pieces she'd have to glue back together later. Her baby was crying, and she was stuck here, helpless to reach him. She stared at that photo until her vision blurred, then tucked the phone away and returned to work. Because that's what single mothers did. They kept moving forward, even when their hearts were breaking for their children. Neither Julian nor Amelia knew that in 20 minutes, their carefully separated worlds would collide in a way that would change everything. Have you ever found yourself making assumptions about someone before truly knowing their story? Julian followed the sound of crying through French doors onto the mansion's wraparound veranda, his Italian leather shoes silent against weathered oak planks. The Charleston evening air hung thick with magnolia blossoms and distant jazz, but all he could focus on was the small figure hunched on the garden steps below. The boy couldn't have been more than 4, dressed in a crisp blue shirt that someone had carefully pressed for this occasion. His light brown skin caught the golden hour sunlight, tear tracks glistening on rounded cheeks as his small shoulders shook with silent sobs. He sat perfectly still, as if afraid that moving might make him more visible to the elegant crowd flowing around the gardens. Julian hesitated at the veranda's edge. Children were foreign territory. His world consisted of boardrooms, quarterly reports, and calculated risks. He understood hostile takeovers better than bedtime stories. Yet something about the boy's isolation, the way he tried to make himself smaller, struck a chord Julian had spent 32 years trying to silence. His own childhood echoed in that posture. The boy at boarding school whose parents were always too busy, too important, too absent to notice when their son needed comfort. Julian descended the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. The boy looked up with startling hazel eyes, wide with surprise and wariness. This close, Julian could see the careful way someone had combed the child's dark curls, the small grass stains on his dress pants that spoke of playground adventures. "Hey there," Julian said, his voice softer than it had been in years. He crouched to the boy's eye level, his expensive suit forgotten. "Rough day?" The boy nodded, fresh tears threatening to spill. "I don't belong here," he whispered, his voice thick with the honest devastation only children could express. "Everyone's fancy, and I'm just me." The words hit Julian like a physical blow. How many times had he felt exactly that? Too young, too poor, too different for the rooms his ambition had forced him into. "What's your name?" Julian asked, settling onto the step beside him, not caring about grass stains on his $2,000 pants. "Noah," the boy said, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Mrs. Patterson brought me 'cause Mama's working. But I don't like it here. Everyone stares." Julian felt something crack open in his chest, a space he'd sealed off years ago. "You know what, Noah? I don't really like it here either." Noah's eyes widened. "But you're fancy like them." "Sometimes fancy is just clothes," Julian said, surprised by his own honesty. "Want to see something cool?" He pulled out his phone, not to check emails for the first time in hours, but to open the camera. "See that fountain over there? I bet I can skip a stone and hit it. Want to help me find the perfect rock?" For the next 20 minutes, Julian forgot about mergers and profit margins. He helped Noah hunt for flat stones, demonstrated proper skipping technique, and listened with genuine attention as the boy told him about his favorite cartoon characters. They built a small tower of smooth pebbles, then knocked it down with gleeful precision. Noah's laughter, pure and uninhibited, filled spaces in Julian's soul he hadn't known were empty. "You're nice," Noah said suddenly, leaning against Julian's shoulder with the unconscious trust children offered so rarely and so completely. Not scary fancy like the others. Julian wrapped his arm around the small boy, feeling something shift permanently inside him. "You're pretty great yourself, buddy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching wedding guests drift past like characters in a play neither of them wanted to join. Julian found himself thinking not about stock prices or competitor analysis, but about bedtime stories and weekend park visits. About what it might feel like to have someone look forward to coming home to him. "Noah." The voice cut through the evening air like a blade, sharp with panic and maternal fury. Julian looked up to see a woman striding toward them across the manicured lawn, her movements fierce and purposeful. She was beautiful in a way that stopped his breath, dark skin glowing in the golden light, natural hair pulled back to reveal high cheekbones and full lips set in a determined line. Her simple black dress and worn shoes couldn't diminish the regal way she carried herself, like a queen surveying her threatened kingdom. But her eyes, dark brown and blazing with protective fire, were fixed on Julian with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously electrified and utterly exposed. This had to be Noah's mother. Julian stood slowly, his hand still resting on Noah's shoulder, and in that frozen moment between recognition and reaction, he understood that his carefully ordered world had just shifted on its axis. The woman approaching them wasn't just beautiful. She was a force of nature, and she was looking at him like he was a threat to everything she held sacred. Time crystallized. The distant music faded. Even Noah seemed to hold his breath. Julian met her gaze across the diminishing distance, seeing his own surprise reflected in her eyes as she took in his expensive suit, his careful grooming, his obvious wealth. He watched her assessment shift from alarm to confusion to something that might have been recognition, not of him personally, but of what he represented. "Mama," Noah called out, jumping up with innocent joy, unaware of the storm about to break. The woman's eyes never left Julian's face as she closed the final steps between them, and he realized that everything, his fortune, his reputation, his entire understanding of himself, was about to be tested by a crying boy's mother who looked like she could challenge gods and win. Amelia reached Noah in 3 swift strides, her hands immediately checking him over for injuries while her eyes remained locked on the stranger who'd been touching her son. The man stood with practiced composure, but she caught the slight tensing of his shoulders, the way his hands moved uncertainly away from Noah, as if her arrival had short-circuited his confidence. "Baby, are you okay?" she asked Noah, her voice deliberately gentle despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Mrs. Patterson said you were upset." "I'm good now, Mama." Noah beamed, pointing at Julian with innocent enthusiasm. "This man played with me. He taught me to skip stones, and he's really nice and—" "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Amelia interrupted, finally allowing herself to look directly at the stranger. Up close, he was even more intimidating, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of effortless polish that came from generational wealth. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. Yet something in his green eyes seemed genuinely warm, almost vulnerable, which only made her more suspicious. Rich white men didn't play with random black children out of pure kindness. There was always an angle. "Julian Thorne," he said, extending his hand with what looked like genuine respect rather than condescending charm. "I was just keeping Noah company." He seemed upset by all the commotion. She didn't take his hand. "Amelia Washington. And I can take care of my own son, thank you." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she watched his face carefully for the familiar flash of offense or dismissal that usually followed when she established boundaries with entitled men. Instead, Julian simply nodded and lowered his hand. "Of course you can," he said quietly. He was crying, and I couldn't walk away." Something in his tone made her pause, a note of genuine confusion, as if he himself didn't understand why he'd stopped. But she'd learned not to trust her first impressions of wealthy men. They were experts at seeming harmless until they decided they were owed something for their kindness. "Noah, baby, go find Mrs. Patterson," she said, not taking her eyes off Julian. "Tell her I'm here to pick you up." "But Mama, I was having fun." "Now, Noah." Her son's face fell, but he obediently trudged toward the mansion, casting longing looks back at Julian. The moment they were alone, Amelia felt the full weight of their class difference settle between them like a wall. "Look, Mr. Thorne, was it?" She crossed her arms, noting how his gaze remained respectfully on her face. "I appreciate you entertaining Noah, but he doesn't need charity from strangers." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It wasn't charity." "Then what was it?" The question came out more aggressive than she'd planned, but years of navigating Charleston's racial dynamics had taught her to strike first before wealthy white folks decided what was best for her family. "I don't know," Julian admitted, and his honesty caught her off guard. "I heard him crying, and I couldn't ignore it." when he said he didn't belong here. He trailed off, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Maybe I saw something familiar. Amelia studied his face, searching for the lie. Men like him, handsome, powerful, obviously successful, they always had an agenda. They saw a struggling single mother, and assumed desperation made her available for whatever they wanted to offer. Familiar how? She challenged. You grew up going to weddings like this. Actually, I grew up being dropped off at weddings like this, Julian said, his voice carrying an edge of old pain. My parents were very good at providing everything except presents. Despite herself, Amelia felt a flicker of sympathy. But sympathy was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when it came to protecting Noah from disappointment. So you thought you'd rescue the sad little black boy. Make yourself feel better. The words hung between them like a challenge. Julian's green eyes flashed with something that might have been hurt, but he didn't deny the accusation. That's not. He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was being selfish. His admission deflated her anger slightly, which only made her more suspicious. Most men would have argued with me. Most men haven't been called out by someone who's clearly not impressed by their bank account, Julian replied, and despite herself, Amelia almost smiled. Almost. Noah, she called, seeing her son emerge from the mansion with Mrs. Patterson hobbling behind him. Say goodbye. We're leaving. Noah's face crumpled. But Mama, Julian was going to show me more stone tricks tomorrow. There won't be a tomorrow, baby, Amelia said firmly, lifting him into her arms despite her aching back. At 4, he was getting heavy, but she needed the physical barrier between her family and this stranger who made her feel unsettled in ways she couldn't name. Julian stepped forward slightly. Amelia, Ms. Washington, she corrected, her voice ice-cold professional. And thank you for your time, Mr. Thorne. I'm sure you have important people to get back to. She turned away before he could respond, before she could see whatever expression crossed his face. But as she carried Noah toward Mrs. Patterson's ancient Honda, she felt Julian's gaze following them like heat against her back. I liked him, Mama, Noah whispered against her neck. He listened to me about dragons. Amelia's heart squeezed painfully. Her son so rarely had positive male attention. Her own father had died when she was 12, and Justin had disappeared before Noah turned 2. But she couldn't let her son get attached to someone who would inevitably move on to more interesting entertainment. Some people are just visiting our story, baby, she murmured, though the words felt heavier than they should. They're not meant to stay. As Mrs. Patterson drove them away from the mansion's golden lights, Amelia told herself she'd done the right thing. Protected her son. Maintained their boundaries. So why did it feel like she'd just walked away from something that might have mattered? The torrential downpour began 15 minutes after Mrs. Patterson's Honda pulled out of the mansion's circular driveway. What started as a gentle Charleston evening shower quickly escalated into a biblical deluge, complete with lightning that split the sky like fractures in dark glass and thunder that made Noah whimper against Amelia's shoulder. Lord have mercy, Mrs. Patterson muttered, gripping the steering wheel as her ancient windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the rain. I can barely see the road. This came out of nowhere. Amelia peered through the passenger window at the wall of water surrounding them. The Honda's headlights barely penetrated 3 feet ahead, and other cars had begun pulling over to wait out the worst of the storm. Maybe we should. A tremendous crack of thunder drowned out her words, followed immediately by a lightning flash that illuminated the road like daylight. In that split second, Amelia saw the tree falling across their path, a massive oak uprooted by the sudden storm, its enormous trunk crashing down just 50 yards ahead. Mrs. Patterson slammed the brakes, sending the Honda into a controlled skid that ended with them sideways across the narrow country road. The engine sputtered and died. Everyone okay? Amelia called out, her heart hammering as she checked Noah, who had started crying at the sudden stop. Fine, Mrs. Patterson said shakily, trying to restart the engine. It turned over once, twice, then nothing. Oh, honey, I think we're stuck. Through the rain-streaked windows, Amelia could make out the massive tree blocking the road ahead, and turning around, saw that other vehicles had already formed a line behind them. They were trapped between the fallen oak and a growing traffic jam, with nowhere to go and a storm that showed no signs of letting up. Noah's crying intensified. "Mama, I'm scared. The thunder's too loud." "It's okay, baby," Amelia soothed, though her own anxiety was rising. She had exactly $12 in her wallet and a cell phone with 2% battery. Mrs. Patterson's ancient Honda wasn't exactly equipped for extended roadside emergencies. A tap on the driver's window made them all jump. Through the rain-distorted glass, Amelia saw a familiar silhouette, tall, expensive umbrella, tailored coat. Her stomach dropped. Julian Thorne bent down to Mrs. Patterson's window, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Is everyone all right here?" Mrs. Patterson rolled down the window a crack, letting in a spray of cold rain. "The car won't start, and we can't get around that tree." "My Range Rover's about 6 cars back," Julian called out, rain dripping from his hair despite the umbrella. "It's got 4-wheel drive and enough clearance to take the back roads around this mess. I can give you a ride." "That's very kind, but—" Amelia started. Another explosive crack of thunder cut her off, and Noah's wails grew louder. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in minutes, and she could feel the Honda's interior growing cold. Through the windows, she saw other stranded motorists making phone calls, some getting out to inspect the blocked road. "Julian," Noah suddenly exclaimed, pressing his face against the rain-streaked window. Julian came back. Amelia closed her eyes briefly. Of all the people to offer help, it had to be the man she'd just finished rejecting. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Mrs. Patterson looked between them with interest. "You two know each other?" "We met at the wedding," Julian said, his eyes finding Amelia's through the window. "Look, I know this is awkward, but this storm isn't letting up anytime soon. My vehicle can get us out of here safely." As if to emphasize his point, lightning illuminated the growing chaos around them. Cars were backing up in both directions, some drivers standing in the rain looking helpless. The tree blocking their path was massive. It would take hours for a crew to clear it, assuming they could even get equipment through in this weather. Noah's crying reached a new pitch. "Mama, the thunder hurts my ears." Amelia's maternal instincts warred with her pride. She could sit here in a cold, broken-down car with a frightened 4-year-old, waiting for help that might not come for hours, or she could accept assistance from a man who made her feel things she couldn't afford to feel. "It's just a ride," Julian added quietly, seeming to sense her internal struggle. "No strings attached. I just want to make sure Noah gets home safe and warm." The fact that he'd said Noah's name, remembered her son in his concern, did something dangerous to her resolve. Mrs. Patterson made the decision for her. "Honey, I've been driving these roads for 70 years, and I've never seen a storm blow up this fast. We need to get that baby somewhere warm and dry." Another flash of lightning, another terrified sob from Noah. Amelia felt her careful walls crumbling under the weight of practical necessity. "Fine," she said, the word coming out sharper than intended. "But just a ride. We'll pay you back for the gas." Something flickered across Julian's face, relief maybe, or something deeper. "That's not necessary. Let me get my car." 10 minutes later, they were transferring a still-sniffling Noah from the Honda to Julian's Range Rover, which was indeed warm, spacious, and equipped with enough technology to run a small country. The leather seats smelled expensive, and the climate control system had already begun drying their rain-dampened clothes. "Where to?" Julian asked, adjusting his rearview mirror to check on Noah, who had stopped crying and was now staring in wonder at the vehicle's interior lighting. Amelia gave him her address, then immediately regretted it. The contrast between his world and hers was about to become painfully obvious. "This car is like a spaceship," Noah whispered in awe, pressing buttons on his armrest that controlled the seat heating. "Pretty cool, right?" Julian smiled at him in the mirror, and Amelia saw her son beam back with uncomplicated joy. As Julian carefully navigated the back roads away from the storm's chaos, Amelia stared out the passenger window and tried to ignore how safe she felt in this warm, protected space, and how dangerous that feeling was to everything she'd built her life around. The drive to Amelia's apartment complex took 25 minutes through Charleston's maze of back roads, and with each mile, Julian felt the weight of unspoken tension settling between them. Noah had fallen asleep in his car seat, borrowed from Mrs. Patterson's car, his small hand still clutching a tissue from his earlier tears. The storm continued to rage outside, turning the world into a watercolor wash of grays and blues. "Turn left at the next light," Amelia said quietly, her voice barely audible over the rain drumming against the roof. She'd been giving directions in clipped, professional tones, maintaining careful distance despite their forced proximity. Julian followed her instructions, noting how the neighborhoods gradually shifted from Charleston's historic charm to utilitarian apartment complexes and strip malls. He wasn't judging. He'd grown up in far worse circumstances, but he could sense Amelia's defensive tension increasing as they approached her world. "It's that building there," she said, pointing to a modest 3-story complex with peeling paint and cars that had seen better decades. "You can just drop us at the entrance." In this storm, Julian glanced at the torrential rain. "I'll walk you up." "That's not necessary." A flash of lightning illuminated Noah's sleeping face, and they both fell silent. Something about their son's peaceful expression. Julian caught himself thinking their son, and felt his chest tighten, made arguing seem petty. "At least let me carry him," Julian said softly. "You shouldn't have to wake him up in this weather." Amelia studied his face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Second floor, apartment 2B. Julian gathered Noah gently, surprised by how natural it felt to hold the sleeping child. Noah stirred briefly, then settled against Julian's shoulder with complete trust. The simple gesture did something profound to Julian's carefully guarded heart. They made their way through the rain to the building's entrance, where a broken security light flickered intermittently. Amelia's keys jingled as she unlocked the main door, and Julian noticed how she held herself. Proud, alert, ready to defend her territory if necessary. The hallway smelled like cooking spices and old carpet, with music drifting from various apartments creating a symphony of lives lived in close quarters. It was nothing like Julian's sterile penthouse, but somehow it felt more alive, more real. "Here," Amelia whispered, unlocking 2B. Julian stepped into a small but immaculately clean one-bedroom apartment that spoke of careful pride and creative resourcefulness. The living room served multiple purposes: play area, study space, and entertainment center, with Noah's toys organized in colorful bins and children's books stacked neatly on every available surface. A fold-out couch dominated one wall, made up with crisp sheets and a superhero comforter. But what stopped Julian cold was the wall above the couch, covered with Noah's artwork, photos of mother and son at various ages, and prominently displayed in the center, a nursing degree from the Medical University of South Carolina. "You're a nurse?" he asked, unable to hide his surprise. Amelia's jaw tightened as she took Noah from his arms. "Was supposed to be. I had to drop out when I got pregnant. 2 semesters short. Why didn't you finish?" The question slipped out before Julian could stop it. "Because babies need things like food and health care, and nursing school doesn't pay the bills," she replied with sharp edges, carrying Noah toward what must be the bedroom. "Some of us can't afford to chase dreams on credit." Julian stood alone in her living room, absorbing the weight of her words and the evidence of her sacrifices surrounding him. A small desk in the corner held nursing textbooks, old editions, probably bought used, with highlighter marks and sticky notes protruding from well-worn pages. As if she still studied them sometimes, still held on to that deferred dream. His father. Julian found himself asking when she returned, then immediately regretted the invasive question. Amelia's eyes flashed dangerously. "Left when I was 7 months pregnant. Said he wasn't ready to be tied down by a baby." She moved around the small space, putting Noah's jacket away, clearly needing something to do with her hands. Turned out he meant he wasn't ready to be tied down by a black baby. Funny how that detail didn't matter when we were dating. The casual way she delivered the painful truth hit Julian like a physical blow. He thought of his own father, absent but still present in the form of trust funds and expectations. This woman had been abandoned completely, left to raise a child alone while sacrificing her own future. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "Don't be." Amelia's voice carried fierce pride. "Noah and I are fine on our own. We don't need—" She stopped abruptly, as if catching herself before saying something she couldn't take back. "Need what?" She looked at him directly for the first time since entering the apartment, her dark eyes blazing with something between vulnerability and defiance. "We don't need some rich white man swooping in to rescue us. We're not a charity case or a feel-good story for you to tell at your next dinner party." The accusation stung because Julian could see how it might look from her perspective. But standing in her small, proud home, surrounded by evidence of her strength and sacrifice, he realized his motivations weren't that simple anymore. "What if it's not about rescue?" he asked quietly. "What if I'm the one who needs something?" Amelia blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "What could you possibly need that you can't buy?" Julian looked around her apartment again, at the family photos, the child's artwork, the nursing books that represented dreams deferred but not abandoned, at the warmth and life that filled every corner despite the modest circumstances. "This," he said simply, "whatever this is that you've built here. I have a penthouse worth more than most people make in a lifetime, and it's empty, completely empty. But your apartment that probably costs a tenth of my monthly mortgage? It's full of everything that matters." Amelia stared at him, something shifting in her expression. For a moment, the careful walls she'd built seemed to waver. Then Noah called out from the bedroom, breaking the spell. "Mama, is Julian still here?" "Go back to sleep, baby," Amelia called back, but her eyes never left Julian's face. The storm continued to rage outside, trapping them in this moment of unexpected honesty, where wealth and poverty, dreams and reality, black and white seemed less important than the simple truth hanging between them. They were both hungry for something the other might be able to provide. Have you ever discovered that someone you thought you understood was carrying a completely different story than you imagined? The storm showed no signs of relenting, and when Amelia checked her phone, she discovered the roads around her complex were flooded. Local news was advising everyone to shelter in place until morning. She stared at the weather alerts, acutely aware of Julian standing in her small living room like an expensive piece of furniture that didn't quite fit the space. "Looks like you're stuck here for a while," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I can call you a rideshare when the flooding goes down." "Actually," Julian said, checking his own phone, "my hotel is in the evacuation zone. The Belmont's entire first floor is underwater." Amelia looked up sharply. "Where are you supposed to go?" Julian shrugged with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to problems money could solve. "I'll figure something out. Maybe drive to Columbia, find a hotel there." In this storm, the words came out sharper than she intended, maternal instincts extending beyond her own child. "Julian, the interstate's closed. They're not letting anyone on the highways." "Mama." Noah appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Why is everyone talking so loud? And why is Julian still here?" Amelia knelt to her son's level. "The storm's really bad, baby. Julian can't get home tonight." Noah's face lit up with uncomplicated joy. "Can he have a sleepover? Like when Tommy stays over at his daddy's house?" "I don't think," Amelia began. "Please, Mama. Julian knows about dragons and spaceships. He told me in the car." Julian crouched beside Amelia, addressing Noah directly. "That's up to your mama, buddy. This is her house, and she gets to decide who stays." The respectful way he deferred to her authority, acknowledging her role as Noah's protector, caught Amelia off guard. Most men tried to go around her decisions when it came to her son. "I can sleep on the couch," Julian added quietly, for her ears only. "I won't impose more than necessary." Something in his tone, humble, almost uncertain, made her really look at him. This man who commanded boardrooms and built empires was asking permission to sleep on her second-hand sofa, and he seemed genuinely worried she'd say no. "The couch is pretty small," she said slowly. "I've slept in worse places." That surprised her. "Really? Foster care until I was 16, Julian said matter-of-factly. "Some of those homes, let's just say your couch looks like luxury compared to a few places I've been." Noah tugged on Julian's sleeve. "What's foster care?" Julian glanced at Amelia, clearly asking permission to explain. She nodded, curious to see how he'd handle the question. "It's when kids live with families who aren't their birth families," Julian said gently. "Sometimes parents can't take care of their children, so other people help out. Like babysitting but longer?" "Exactly like that." Julian's smile was soft, genuine. "Some foster families are wonderful. Others, not so much. But it taught me that home isn't about how big your house is. It's about the people who make you feel safe." Amelia felt something shift in her chest. She'd assumed his childhood had been privileged, that his wealth was inherited rather than earned through necessity. "Okay," she heard herself saying. "You can stay. But Noah, bedtime for real this time. Can Julian read me a story first?" Before Amelia could object, Julian was already shaking his head. "That's your mama's job. But maybe I could listen if that's okay." 20 minutes later, the three of them were crowded onto Noah's small bed, a full-size mattress that nearly filled the bedroom. Amelia read from Where the Wild Things Are, while Noah snuggled between them, occasionally adding his own commentary about the monsters. Julian listened with genuine attention, asking thoughtful questions that made Noah beam with importance. "Max reminds me of someone," Julian said when Amelia closed the book. "Who?" Noah asked sleepily. "A little boy I know who's brave enough to make friends with strangers at fancy parties." Noah giggled. "That's me." "That's you," Julian agreed, ruffling Noah's curls with easy affection. After Noah finally fell asleep, they retreated to the living room. Amelia put on a pot of coffee, the good stuff she saved for special occasions, while Julian examined the photos on her walls. "He looks like you," Julian said, studying a picture of newborn Noah. "Everyone says that, but I see his father in his eyes." Amelia joined him with 2 steaming mugs. "The hazel color, the shape. Sometimes it's hard to look at. Is that why you kept his last name?" "Washington." Amelia settled onto the couch, tucking her legs under her. "My choice. I didn't want Noah carrying the name of a man who abandoned him. Washington was my grandmother's maiden name. She raised me after my parents died. Seemed right to honor her instead." Julian sat carefully on the other end of the couch, maintaining respectful distance. "Tell me about her." For the next hour, as the storm raged outside, Amelia found herself sharing stories she rarely told anyone. About Grandma Rose, who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table and still found time to help with homework. About winning a full scholarship to nursing school and feeling like she was finally going to make something of herself. About the night Justin left, when she was too pregnant to chase after him and too proud to beg him to stay. "I don't usually talk this much," she admitted, surprised by her own openness. "Maybe you don't usually have someone who knows how to listen," Julian replied. Something warm unfurled in Amelia's chest. "What about you? What's the real story behind all that success?" Julian was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he began talking about aging out of foster care at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and fierce determination. About working construction during the day and taking computer programming classes at night. About his first tech startup failing spectacularly, leaving him sleeping in his car for 3 months. "The money came later," he said. "Success came later. But the loneliness, that's been constant. Until tonight." Their eyes met across the small space between them, and Amelia felt something she'd sworn off years ago. Hope. Not just attraction, though that was certainly there, but something deeper. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who understood both strength and vulnerability. "Julian," Noah's sleepy voice called from the bedroom. "Yeah, buddy. Are you going to be here when I wake up?" Julian looked at Amelia, a question in his eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'll be here," Julian called back. Good, Noah mumbled. I like when you're here. In the soft lamplight of her small living room, with coffee growing cold between them and the storm creating a cocoon around their unexpected intimacy, Amelia realized she liked when he was here too. And that terrified her more than anything. Amelia woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the sound of laughter from the kitchen. For a disoriented moment, she'd forgotten about Julian sleeping on her couch, forgotten about the storm that had trapped them together. The digital clock read 7:23 a.m., and she could hear Noah's animated chatter mixed with Julian's deeper voice responding with genuine interest. She padded to the kitchen doorway in her robe and froze. Julian stood at her small stove, still wearing yesterday's expensive shirt, now wrinkled and rolled up at the sleeves, flipping pancakes while Noah sat on the counter beside him, swinging his legs and directing the cooking process with 4-year-old authority. More blueberries, Julian. Mama likes lots of blueberries. Your wish is my command, Chef Noah, Julian replied, sprinkling berries into the batter with exaggerated precision. The domestic scene hit Amelia like a physical blow. This was everything she'd dreamed of during those long nights when Noah was a baby. A partner who would help with breakfast, who would listen to her son's rambling stories, who would fit seamlessly into their morning routine. But it was also everything she'd learned not to want, because wanting it made losing it unbearable. Mama. Noah spotted her and waved enthusiastically. Julian's making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Look. Indeed, the pancake in the pan bore a vague resemblance to a stegosaurus, if you squinted and used considerable imagination. Julian turned with a sheepish smile. I hope you don't mind. Noah was hungry, and I found pancake mix in your cabinet. I replaced what I used. There's a grocery bag on the counter. Amelia's eyes moved to the bag, then to her cabinet, which she noticed was now better stocked than it had been yesterday. Not just pancake mix, but orange juice, bacon, fresh fruit, coffee. Expensive brands she never bought because they weren't in her budget. You went shopping? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. The storm cleared around 5 a.m. Everything's open again. Julian flipped the dinosaur pancake with more confidence than it deserved. I thought you might need a few things after being stuck inside. I didn't ask you to do that. Something in her tone made Julian pause, spatula halfway to the plate. I know. I just wanted to help. Help, Amelia repeated, the word sitting wrong in her mouth. She looked around her kitchen, seeing it suddenly through different eyes. The cabinet he'd restocked without asking, the expensive ingredients that screamed charity, the way he'd made himself at home in her space. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her supervisor at the restaurant. Where are you? You missed the opening shift. Call me ASAP. Amelia's stomach dropped. In the chaos of the storm and Julian's unexpected presence, she'd completely forgotten she was supposed to open Magnolia's kitchen at 6 a.m. Shit, she muttered, then caught herself. Sorry, Noah. Mama said a bad word. What's wrong? Julian asked, genuine concern in his voice. I missed work. Amelia's hands shook as she dialed her supervisor's number. I never miss work. I can't afford to miss work. She stepped into the living room for the call, but Julian and Noah could hear every word through the thin walls. Marcus, I'm so sorry. The storm trapped me at home last night, and I didn't have power to charge my phone. This is the 3rd time this month you've been late or absent, Amelia. Marcus's voice was loud enough for Julian to hear. I've got customers complaining about inconsistent service and corporates breathing down my neck about labor costs. It won't happen again, I promise. I can be there in 20 minutes. Don't bother coming in today. Take the weekend to think about whether this job is really a priority for you. The line went dead. Amelia stared at her phone, feeling her carefully constructed world crumble around her. 3 days without work meant 3 days without tips. 3 days without tips meant choosing between groceries and electricity next week. She walked back into the kitchen where Julian was helping Noah cut his dinosaur pancake, both of them pretending they hadn't heard her conversation. Everything okay? Julian asked carefully. Fine, Amelia lied, then looked at the grocery bag again. The expensive coffee, organic fruit, and bacon cost more per pound than she usually spent on meat for a week. Actually, no. It's not fine. Julian straightened, recognizing the shift in her tone. What can I do? You can stop. The words came out sharper than she intended. Stop buying groceries I didn't ask for. Stop making yourself at home in my kitchen. Stop playing house with my son like you're going to stick around. Amelia, do you know what I make in a month, Julian? She was gaining momentum now, anger and fear propelling her forward. $1,200. On a good month. You probably spend more than that on shoes. That's not fair. Fair. Amelia laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Fair would be if I could afford to miss a day of work without choosing between keeping the lights on or feeding my son. It would be fair if I didn't have to smile and pretend to be grateful when rich people decide to play charity with my life. Noah had stopped eating, his small face creased with confusion and worry. Mama, why are you mad at Julian? The question broke something open in Amelia's chest. Because Julian hadn't done anything wrong, not really. He'd been kind, respectful, and genuine. But kindness from his world always came with invisible strings, invisible expectations, invisible reminders of everything she couldn't provide for her son. I'm not mad at Julian, baby, she said, forcing her voice to soften. Mama just needs to talk to him privately. She waited until Noah went to brush his teeth, then turned back to Julian, who was standing very still by the stove. I need you to leave, she said quietly. Because I bought groceries? Because you're dangerous. The honesty surprised them both. You waltz into our lives with your expensive car and your easy money, and suddenly my son thinks every day should include dinosaur pancakes and bedtime stories from someone who treats him like he matters. But you're not staying, Julian. You're going back to your penthouse and your board meetings and your life that doesn't include us. And when you do, Noah's going to ask where you went, and I'm going to have to explain why another man decided we weren't worth keeping. Julian's face went pale. That's not what this is. Isn't it? Amelia crossed her arms, armor back in place. This has been fun for you. A little adventure with the noble single mother and her cute kid. But eventually reality sets in. Eventually, you remember that I'm a high school dropout who serves food for a living, and Noah's a mixed-race kid with no father and behavioral issues from being abandoned. Eventually, we become inconvenienced. Behavioral issues? Julian's voice was sharp. Noah doesn't have behavioral issues. He's a normal, bright, wonderful 4-year-old. Tell that to his daycare. Tell that to the teachers who assume he's aggressive because of how he looks. Tell that to every person who sees a black woman with a biracial child and makes assumptions about what kind of life we lead. Julian stepped toward her, and she stepped back. Amelia, I would never. You already have. The words came out like broken glass. You've already made me want things I can't have. You've already made Noah love someone who's going to leave. So please just go. Before this gets any worse. Julian stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the exact moment he stopped fighting. The moment he accepted her version of who he was and what this meant. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt either of you. He gathered his jacket and keys while Amelia stood frozen in her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of his temporary presence. The dinosaur pancakes, the expensive groceries, the coffee cups that had held their late-night conversations. Tell Noah I said goodbye, Julian said at the door. Amelia nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, she sat at her small table and stared at the dinosaur pancake cooling on Noah's plate. From the bathroom, she could hear her son humming happily while brushing his teeth, oblivious to the fact that their brief glimpse of something beautiful had just shattered into pieces she'd never be able to put back together. Julian sat in his Range Rover outside Amelia's apartment complex for 20 minutes after she asked him to leave, staring at the peeling paint and broken security lights that marked the boundary between her world and his. His hands gripped the steering wheel as her words echoed in his mind. You're dangerous. You've already made me want things I can't have. He'd driven straight to his hotel, checked out, and headed for the airport with every intention of flying back to New York and forgetting this had ever happened. But instead, he found himself parked outside her building like some kind of stalker, unable to make his hands turn the key. His phone buzzed with the 15th urgent email of the morning. The Tokyo merger was falling apart without his immediate attention. His board of directors was asking questions. His assistant had rescheduled 3 crucial meetings. His entire empire was teetering while he sat in a parking lot in Charleston, thinking about a 4-year-old boy who called him by his first name and a woman who saw through every wall he'd ever built. Eventually, you remember that I'm a high school dropout who serves food for a living. The accusation stung because it was so fundamentally wrong it made him question everything else she'd said. How could someone so intelligent, so clearly capable, think her education level or job title mattered to him? He'd started with nothing. He knew the difference between worth and wealth better than most. But then he remembered the way she'd looked at the groceries, not grateful, but cornered. The careful pride in her voice when she'd given him her address, bracing herself for his judgment. The way she'd stepped back when he'd tried to get closer, as if his proximity was dangerous to more than just her heart. She was protecting herself. More than that, she was protecting Noah. Julian thought about his own childhood, the parade of foster families who'd taken him in out of duty or financial incentive, only to send him back when he became inconvenient. He thought about the well-meaning couples who'd treated him like a charity case, a way to feel good about themselves until the novelty wore off. Was that what he'd been doing? Playing house with someone else's family because it felt good to be needed? His phone rang. Michael, the groom from yesterday's wedding. Julian, how'd you escape that storm? We heard half of Charleston was underwater. I'm fine, Julian said absently, watching Amelia's windows for any sign of movement. Good. Listen, fascinating story from last night. My new mother-in-law was working the wedding, helping with the catering, and she said you spent the whole evening playing with some random kid. Very unlike you to notice children exist. Julian's attention sharpened. Mrs. Patterson is your mother-in-law? Yes, sweet old thing. Been a family friend for decades. She was telling everyone how some nice rich man helped her with this crying boy. Said the kid's mother came to pick him up, a beautiful black woman, very protective. Mrs. Patterson thinks there might have been some chemistry there. Michael chuckled. Can you imagine? You, smitten with a single mother? Julian closed his eyes. Of course. Mrs. Patterson knew the family Michael had married into. This wasn't random at all. Michael, what do you know about the mother? Amelia. Not much. Mrs. Patterson's been watching the kid for a few years. Says the mother works herself to the bone, trying to finish nursing school while supporting them both. Real sad story. Apparently she was almost done with her degree when she got pregnant and had to drop out. The father split, leaving her with nothing. Nursing school, Julian repeated. Yeah, Mrs. Patterson's always saying what a shame it is. The woman's brilliant, apparently. Top of her class before everything fell apart. She keeps talking about going back, but with a kid and bills. Michael trailed off. Why all the questions? Julian didn't answer directly. What would it take? To finish nursing school, I mean. Hell, I don't know. Why? Are you thinking about a career change? Michael laughed at his own joke. Though I guess if anyone could afford to go back to school for fun, it'd be you. After ending the call, Julian sat in his car and made a decision that would either change everything or destroy any chance he had left. 3 hours later, Amelia was cleaning up the remains of breakfast when her doorbell rang. Noah, who had spent the morning asking where Julian went and why he couldn't come back to play, raced to the window. It's Julian, he shouted with pure joy. Mama, Julian came back. Amelia's heart did something complicated, part hope, part panic, all dangerous. She opened the door to find Julian holding a manila folder and wearing an expression she couldn't read. I know you asked me to leave, he said before she could speak. But I need to say something, and then I'll go if you want me to. Julian. Noah launched himself at Julian's legs, and Julian caught him easily, lifting him up with automatic affection. Hey, buddy. Did you finish those dinosaur pancakes? Yes, but they were sad without you. Mama was sad too, but she said she wasn't. Noah, Amelia warned. Go play in your room for a minute. But, now baby. After Noah reluctantly disappeared, Amelia crossed her arms and waited. You think I'm going to leave, Julian said without preamble. You think I'm treating you and Noah like a charity case or a temporary distraction. Aren't you? No. He held out the folder. This is an application to the Medical University of South Carolina's Accelerated Nursing Program. You have until Monday to submit it for fall admission. Amelia stared at the folder like it might explode. What are you doing? I'm not trying to rescue you, Julian said carefully. You don't need rescuing. You're the strongest person I've ever met. But I called the school this morning. With your previous credits, you could finish your degree in 18 months. They have evening and weekend programs designed for working parents. I can't afford. There's a scholarship. Julian's voice was steady, professional. The Rose Washington Memorial Scholarship. It covers full tuition, books, and provides a monthly stipend for childcare and living expenses. Amelia's breath caught. Rose Washington was my grandmother's name. I know. Julian met her eyes. I established the fund this morning. It's in her honor, but it's not charity. It's an investment. In you. In Noah's future. In fact, exceptional people deserve exceptional opportunities, regardless of their circumstances. You can't just. I can. I did. Julian stepped closer. Amelia, I'm not leaving. I'm not going back to New York and forgetting you exist. I'm staying in Charleston. I'm opening a satellite office here, moving my headquarters if necessary. Not for you, for me. Because in 32 years, I've never felt at home anywhere until I was sitting on your couch, listening to you read bedtime stories. Amelia felt tears threatening. Julian, I love him, Julian said quietly. I love Noah like he's my own son. And I love you like I've never loved anyone in my life. Not because you need me, but because I need you. Both of you. More than I need my next merger or my next million. What if it doesn't work? The question came out as a whisper. What if we try this and it falls apart? Then we'll figure it out together, Julian said. But I'm not walking away from the best thing that's ever happened to me because you're scared. I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. But some things are worth the risk. From the bedroom came Noah's voice. Are you guys done talking? Can Julian stay for dinner? Amelia looked at the folder in her hands, then at the man who had somehow seen past every wall she'd built and decided she was worth fighting for. The scholarship, she said slowly. It's really not charity. It's an investment in the future. Noah's going to need his mother to be a nurse when he scrapes his knees playing soccer, or when he brings home his first girlfriend and needs someone to patch up his broken heart. Despite everything, Amelia smiled. You think you'll still be around for his first girlfriend? I plan to be around long enough to embarrass him at his wedding, Julian said. If you'll let me. Amelia Washington looked at Julian Thorne, really looked at him, and saw not a rich man playing with her life, but someone as lost and hopeful as she was. Someone offering not a rescue, but a partnership. Dinner, she said finally. We can start with dinner. Julian's smile could have powered the entire apartment complex. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. The graduation ceremony at the Medical University of South Carolina was held on a perfect Charleston morning, with azaleas blooming pink and white around the historic campus. Julian adjusted his tie nervously, not because he was addressing the Tokyo board in an hour via video conference, but because he was more anxious about this moment than any business deal he'd ever closed. There she is. Noah pointed excitedly from his seat in the second row, bouncing on Julian's lap despite being almost 6 years old now. That's my mama. Amelia Washington walked across the stage in her cap and gown, her smile radiant as she received her Bachelor of Science in Nursing. The Rose Washington Memorial Scholarship had indeed covered everything, but it was Amelia's determination, late-night study sessions, and sheer brilliance that had earned her summa cum laude honors. Julian's chest swelled with pride so fierce it nearly overwhelmed him. This woman, his woman, though she still made him work for that title every day, had balanced full-time nursing school, part-time work at a pediatric clinic, and raising Noah, all while maintaining the fierce independence that had attracted him in the first place. Is she going to be a real nurse now? Noah whispered loudly, drawing chuckles from nearby families. She already is, Julian whispered back. The diploma just makes it official. After the ceremony, they found Amelia surrounded by classmates and professors, all congratulating the woman who had become something of a legend in their program. The single mother who never missed a class, helped struggling students with study groups, and still managed to volunteer at the free clinic on weekends. Mama! Noah broke free from Julian's hand and launched himself into Amelia's arms, nearly knocking off her mortarboard. You did it. You're the smartest mama in the whole world. Not the whole world, Amelia laughed, spinning him around. But maybe the luckiest. Her eyes found Julian's over Noah's head, and the look that passed between them contained 18 months of shared struggles, quiet victories, and growing love. They'd taken things slowly, too slowly, in Julian's opinion, but Amelia had insisted on building their relationship on solid ground rather than desperate need. She'd been right, as usual. What they had now was stronger than anything built on rescue fantasies or charity. How does it feel, Nurse Washington? Julian asked, approaching with a bouquet of her favorite sunflowers. It feels like the beginning, she said, accepting the flowers with a kiss that still made his heart race. Dr. Martinez offered me a position in the pediatric ICU. You're going to take it? I already did. Amelia's grin was triumphant. Starting Monday. Full benefits, enough salary to actually save money for Noah's college fund. Julian spun her around, mortarboard flying off her head as Noah cheered from the sidelines. When he set her down, there were tears in both their eyes. I'm so proud of you, he murmured against her forehead. Your grandmother would be proud too. Amelia's hand found his, their fingers interlacing with the easy familiarity of 18 months spent learning each other's rhythms. Julian had indeed relocated his business to Charleston, though it had taken some creative maneuvering to convince his board that the move was strategically sound rather than romantically motivated. His penthouse in New York had been sold. He now lived in a restored Victorian home 3 miles from Amelia's apartment, close enough to help with morning routines, but far enough to respect her need for independence. Picture time, called Mrs. Patterson, who had become an unofficial grandmother to their unconventional family. She'd been instrumental in bringing them together, though she insisted it was all God's plan and she'd simply been the vessel. As they posed for photos, Julian's arm around Amelia's waist, Noah perched on his shoulders, all 3 of them laughing at something silly Noah had said. Julian thought about the wedding where this had all begun, how a crying child had led him to the love of his life, how Amelia's protective instincts had nearly driven him away before drawing him deeper in. Julian, Amelia said quietly while Noah posed with Mrs. Patterson and some of her classmates. I need to tell you something. The serious tone made Julian's stomach clench. What is it? I've been thinking about what comes next. Now that school's finished, now that I have a real career. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I don't want us to keep living separately anymore. Julian's heart stopped. What are you saying? I'm saying that Noah asked me last night when you were going to move in with us for real. And I realized I didn't have a good answer anymore. Amelia's dark eyes sparkled with mischief and something deeper. So I'm asking, Julian Thorne, would you like to come home? The word home hit him like a physical force. Home. Not his house, not his space, but home. The place where Noah's artwork covered the refrigerator and Amelia hummed while making dinner, and family meant more than blood or paperwork. Are you sure? He asked, though his heart was already singing. I've never been more sure of anything. Amelia stepped closer, her cap and gown rustling. I love you. Noah loves you. And more importantly, we trust you. With our hearts, with our future, with everything that matters. Julian kissed her then, right there in front of the entire nursing class, with Noah cheering and Mrs. Patterson taking pictures they'd treasure forever. When they broke apart, Both were laughing and crying simultaneously. "Is that a yes?" Amelia asked. "That's a hell yes," Julian replied, then caught himself. "Sorry, Noah." "It's okay." Noah called out from where he was showing off his mama's diploma to anyone who would listen. Mama says bad words when she's really happy too. Later that evening, as they sat on the steps of Amelia's apartment, soon to be their former apartment, watching Noah play with the neighbor kids in the courtyard, Amelia leaned against Julian's shoulder with comfortable contentment. "Remember what you said that first night?" she asked. "About being the one who needed something." "I remember. What do you need now?" Julian looked at Noah, who was teaching another child how to skip stones using techniques Julian had shown him months ago. He looked at Amelia, her graduation cap sitting crooked on her head because she'd forgotten to take it off, her nursing degree carefully rolled in its tube beside them. He thought about tomorrow's house hunting appointment, about the pediatric ICU job that would let Amelia save children's lives, about the family they were building one careful day at a time. "Nothing," he said honestly. "For the first time in my life, I don't need anything else. I have everything I never knew I wanted. Even the chaos, even Noah's questions about why rich people have so many bathrooms, even my stubborn streak, especially your stubborn streak." Julian pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "It's what kept you fighting when things got hard. It's what made you worth fighting for." "Julian," Noah's voice called from the courtyard. "Can you come show Marcus how to make the stones bounce 3 times? "Duty calls," Amelia said with a smile. Julian stood, then turned back to help her up. "Ready to go home, Nurse Washington?" "With you." Amelia's smile was radiant. "I've been ready since the moment you decided a crying boy was worth your time." As they walked toward their future, messy, uncertain, but filled with more love than either had thought possible, Julian realized that sometimes the best mergers weren't about companies or profits. Sometimes they were about hearts finding their missing pieces in the most unexpected places. And sometimes those mergers were worth more than all the money in the world. What unexpected connections have taught you the most about love, family, or your own capacity for growth? Tell me in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe for more amazing stories.